Dear friends, no, not friends, brothers, sisters, children, because that's what it feels like at the moment. We feel like a family, not like a society. And that's what's been so very special about these difficult times in which we are. And I've spoken to you earlier in one of the earlier videos on the importance of us retaining our moral compass during a time that we're going to be increasingly pressurized by the world around us to adopt their moral compass and make decisions according to their ethic rather than according to our ethic. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about that moral compass and what we're encompassing. And in so doing, let's look at three different models of distraction in the Torah. And I'm not comparing any of the models to our current situation, but I think we can gain some understanding of the spectrum that we're dealing with when having to deal with evil. The first time we see evil being dealt with on a large scale in the Torah is the period of the flood in Noach. And there's one family, there are 8 people, and the decision is, Hashem's decision is, the world needs to be destroyed. But he saves the 8 people, he doesn't destroy the tzaddikim. Then we've got Sodom, where there's a city of evil people. And Abraham pleads with Hashem and says, Ha'af tispeh tzaddikim rasha, are you really going to destroy the righteous people, even if there are only a few of them in Sodom? Are you going to destroy them together with the wicked people? And Hashem says, no, if there were even just 10 righteous people, I would allow the city to be saved because those 10 righteous people could still turn the city around in the future. But there aren't even 10. So there we hear the kind of reasoning that we're hearing today. Why are you killing the righteous with the wicked? But in both those cases, in both Sodom and the flood, the decision maker is Hashem. Hashem knows who the tzaddikim are, he knows who the rishaim are, he knows who's righteous, he knows who's wicked, and it's God who is the judge, and God makes the decisions. In the third case, we're dealing with Amalek, and there we have to make the decisions, and there's no discretion. The decision there is, Machot timche et zecher Amalek, you have to wipe out the memory of Amalek. And the differences between these, there are many differences of course, but some of the differences between these are that in the case of Noach, the evil was driven by self-interest, it was greed and ambition and theft. The corruption had seeped into the whole system and all of society, and there was no way of being able to salvage the system anymore. The system had to be destroyed. And that entailed destroying the people other than the family of Noach who were not part of that system. In the case of Sodom also, it was driven by self-interest. It was driven by greed. It was driven by selfishness. And in that case too, there's a need to destroy the city. And since there weren't even 10, there wasn't even a minion of righteous people, the whole city gets destroyed. In the case of Amalek, their evil was not driven by self-interest. Their evil was driven by a commitment and a worship of terror. To attack the people from behind, to attack the weak people, to attack the women and children, to attack the people who are not armed, so as to instill fear and terror into the people. That's not self-interest. That's not a strategy for victory. That's evil. And that's not just behavioral, that is societal, that is cultural. And Hashem instructs us in that case to destroy every single one of the Amalekite people, because there will never be a restoration of a righteous ethic in a nation that culturally is committed to terror. And in our situation, we are dealing with a group of people. Let's start off talking just about Hamas. I'm not sure how you define who is Hamas and who is not Hamas. It's not just about a card-carrying Hamas member. I guess anybody who has participated or supported terror is a member of Hamas. I guess that anybody who has celebrated October the 7th is a member of Hamas. And people such as these are not being driven by self-interest. This is not something they want. This is a desire to destroy. This is a desire to kill and to terrorize people. There's a commitment to terror that we're facing. You see, this journey is going to be long and deeply painful and very lonely. Because as we move and more innocent people are killed, our friends are going to leave us, or might well leave us, one by one. But we are at our best when we're separate, not when we're part of the global community. Yes, we have to engage with the global community. We have to do business with the global community. We have to respect the members of the global community and be responsible citizens of the globe, but not to adopt value systems and systems of ethics that are foreign to us. Hein am levadad yishkon. The Netziv explains that to mean that when the Jewish people operate on their own, following their own value system as taught to them by their forefathers, following the Torah of Hashem, irrespective of what world public opinion is, irrespective of what liberal education teaches and what the media preaches, when Hein am levadad, when we are a nation on our own, yishkon, then we will dwell in peace and in prosperity. But uvai goyim, when we go out of our way to abandon our unique Jewishness and to create a state that is like all the other states, to create a state that operates by the same liberal democratic values as the other states without being founded in Jewish values, then lo yitchashav. Even the non-Jewish world will not consider us as part of them, as one of them. The more we try to become one, the more we try to conform, the less we will be accepted. And so we need to take pride in who we are, pride in what we stand for, pride in our own identity, and be ourselves as we do that. And you see, the Western world is schooled in a system of ethics where there is an enormous empathy and a sympathy for somebody who's being oppressed, for somebody who's unfortunate. And that feeling, that is a Torah-based feeling, where it ceases to be a Torah-based feeling when it's the only ethic. So, for example, we're instructed in the Torah that if a judge is judging a court case, and there's a millionaire against a poor person, and the poor person is the guilty one, or the poor person is found to be owing $100 to the millionaire, and the judge thinks to himself, $100 makes no difference to the millionaire. $100 will be devastating for the poor man. Let me find in favor of the rich man so as not to oppress the poor man. We're not permitted to do that. That's called distortion of justice. If you're worried about the poor man, then the judge should take $100 out of his own pocket and give it to the poor man so that the poor man can pay the rich man. But don't allow sympathy to distort justice, because then we're on a slippery slope of moral confusion. And one can sympathize with a lot of people. One can sympathize with the people we're seeing on our screens being killed in Gaza at the moment. We can make our own assumptions that many of them are really genuinely innocent, that many of them are good people even. And we can feel terrible sadness and sympathy for them. But that can't distort the justice. And the justice is Hamas needs to be destroyed. As the Secretary of Defense of the United States told our Minister of Defense this week, as he reported yesterday, we're not just fighting Hamas on our doorstep. We're fighting Hamas on the doorstep of Western civilization, of the free world. And when our Minister of Defense referred to them as Israel's ISIS, the Secretary of Defense said, no, they're no ISIS. They're far worse than ISIS. And we need to keep that in mind as we go through this lonely time, and where we increasingly become a hein am levadad, that in order to be yishkon, in order to have that ultimate peace and prosperity, we have to be levad. We've got to do what we have to do in the way that we have to do that. Not something we chose, not something that we wanted, something that is being forced upon us by an evil force, a force that wants our destruction and the destruction of everything that is connected with a Judeo-ethic, everything that is connected with freedom, with service of God, with a celebration of life and love. They are as deliberate in their intention to wipe out Christianity as they are Judaism. They will wipe out anything that they believe is not the way they want their world to be. That's this world of commitment to terror. That's this world of Amalek that we're dealing with. Not driven by self-interest. You can't sit down and have a conversation to negotiate peace. You can negotiate with somebody who has self-interest. But if somebody is willing to die and to send every one of their own people, fathers, wives, husbands, children, to their death and celebrate that death, you can't negotiate with such people. There is no negotiation. And so there's only one way to deal with people who are committed to terror, with Amalek. And this machot timche et zecher Amalek. It needs to be wiped out. Again, I'm talking about Hamas. And yes, there are many Gazan people who are infected with hate, and that we might not be able to turn them around. That doesn't mean we kill them, but it means that they need to be fearful of ever acting on the hate they've been taught, and to know that that's not something that they would ever do. We were thought of as the victims for a day or two after October the 7th. And as victims, the world sympathized. The world sympathized with us after 1945. The world sympathized with us before the Six-Day War, and maybe sympathized a little bit with us for a day or two during or in the early stages of the Yom Kippur War. When it's very clear to the world that we are the victims, we have their sympathy. But Jews are not victims. We are the people of Hashem, and we have Hashem's protection. We're not victims. And when we're not victims and we begin to fight for virtue, to fight for what is right and what is true, and you can only fight for what is good if you're willing to fight against what is bad. And when we begin to fight against what is bad, in the eyes of the media and the liberal West, they, bad, becomes the victim. And it's the only ethic. Who is the aggressor and who is the victim? Not who is right and who is wrong. Not who is good and who is bad. The West has lost its moral capacity to make those decisions as to who is right and wrong and who is good and bad. And so all they're left with is the emotion of sympathy aroused by a sense of victimhood. And Hamas has made a masterful profession of keeping their people in victimhood, so that they should always be seen by the Western world as victims in deserving of sympathy, deserving of support, and deserving of help, irrespective of how evil their leadership is, irrespective of how evil large bodies of their people are, and what atrocities they commit. The moment those atrocious barbarians become apparent victims, the floodgates of sympathy from the West pour out to them. And they manipulate the West through the media and other methods to be able to play on that victimhood. And so we're going to be increasingly portrayed as the perpetrators. And as we do that and our friends peel away from us, as might happen, we might see things like diplomatic relations being broken. We might see things like economic sanctions. We might even see things like travel bans, where we can't travel to certain countries. That's the degree of loneliness that there might be ahead of us. And we will learn through this long, deeply painful and lonely journey that Hein Am Levadad Yishkon, that we are at our best when we are unique. We are at our best when we have this excellence of moral clarity, and when we're able to pursue that which is true and that which is good, and able to teach the world and give the world so much as the Jewish people have through the times that is positive and celebratory and valuable, instead of giving the world darkness and death as our enemies are doing. During this time, during this long, painful, lonely journey, we're going to need each other, because we won't have really anybody else. We're going to find, as many of us have already, that people we thought were friends of ours around the world aren't. I'm talking even about individual friends, never mind about nations. And we might find ourselves increasingly isolated from people we thought supported us. And in times like that, we need each other. Tons of love, patience, kindness, as we're seeing in our country, with such pride and such sense of awe as we look at what is happening in terms of the kindness and the love that we find among the Jewish people at this difficult time. And our challenge will be to keep that up, to keep that going, no matter how long the journey is. And the biggest challenge of all will be afterwards to keep it in place, to keep it going and not to default back to where we were. And as I said in an earlier video also, be most careful about the people closest to you. It's easy to become short-tempered with one's partner, with one's children, with one's close friends. Be very, very careful to be patient, caring and loving with the people around us. And a few things that it's important to try and maintain during these difficult times, and there are specialists in the field who can help, but important to keep a routine and to keep children in a routine the best way that you possibly can, so that there's a sense of security and consistency in that. Limiting the time of exposure to news and social media even more than during normal times. Just watching the cadence and limiting the time. Physical exercise, really important, and where possible with the family, whether the family goes out for a walk or a cycling ride together, or downloads an exercise video and does some exercise in the living room together. Exercise and togetherness, really important. Family activities, just having fun playing a board game or talking around the table or watching a movie, just doing something with the family together so that the children feel that connectedness. And as connected as we are to our children during this time, important to be honest with them. They know what we know. And in the kindest way to be able to have honest conversations with them about what is going on, but to support those conversations in abundant love and a sense of security. And in that love to be aware of the importance of physical contact. The love needs to be the hugs and the kisses and the holding, again, between husbands and wives, between parents and children, between brothers and sisters. That physical contact is really important at this time. And learning Torah takes one's mind off and attaches one to something higher than what's going on around us, and elevates our minds and our souls to a higher place. Inspiring shiurim, learning pieces of Torah that are valuable. So intensify your time and your commitment and your passion to the learning of Torah, each in their own way, to their own abilities. And focusing on faith, on bitachon, talking about it. Faith needs to become a part of the family conversation. And faith with love, loving Hashem, not just believing and trusting Hashem, even in these difficult times. Talking about our connection to Hashem, our trust in Hashem, and our love of Hashem. And tefillah, the power of prayer. To be able to daven, to be able to pray with the feeling that this really works, not to pray as a transactional routine thing where you mumble the Tehillim or you mumble the Tefillot, but that you're able to daven, to pray to Hashem in a way where you believe my prayers could bring back some captives. My prayers could turn the war. My prayers could make a difference to the lives of our soldiers. My prayers can make a difference to peace in Israel and in the world. To daven and pray with that feeling of passion and knowledge, not just belief, but knowledge of the power of prayer. And then we'll find, in fact, that Vayehi Bishurun Melech, as I've mentioned before, when is Hashem, the King of Israel, Behit Asef Rashei Am, when there is a gathering together of the heads of the people, as we're seeing now, people from different factions and different parties, religious and irreligious, conservative and liberal, sitting together and trying to find solutions and trying to work things out, but within the framework of values of the Torah, within the framework of Jewish values. Then it'll be Yachad Shiftei Yisrael. Then the different Shavatim, the different tribes, each with their own style, each with their own way of serving Hashem, each with their own beliefs within the guardrails of Judaism, of the Torah, will sit Yachad together. That's when Vayehi Bishurun Melech, when the King of Israel will stand in front of us and lead us and vanquish our enemies and restore peace to our land and to the world.